Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the Utah Board of Water Resources briefing meeting. We'd like to extend a welcome to all those that are participating with us today, and extend appreciation to Central Utah for allowing us to utilize their facilities to hold the board meeting today. And would like to also extend a thank you to all of those who organized the board tour yesterday for the sites that we were able to visit and participate in, and whoever arranged for the weather to be accommodating. We really appreciate that. Wayne, I think, is going to take credit for that, but nonetheless, we welcome everyone here. I failed to mention I'm Kyle Stevens, chairman of the board this year. We'd like to recognize the members of the board that are here. And so we'll ask them to introduce themselves, just beginning on the left of me, Randy, or I guess, no, Jim, you're on the very end. So we'll let Jim begin.
Jim Lemon, Washington County.
Randy Crozier, Uinta Basin.
Norman Johnson, San Juan County area.
Wayne Anderson, Provo River.
Blaine Ibsen, Severe River area.
Charles Holmgren, Bear River Basin.
And I'm Kyle Stevens, representing the Legal River District area. We'll note that Juliette Tennant is excused from our meetings today. She had a conflict with some other board meetings that she's involved with, and so we extend excuse her from participation in the meetings today. So we'll let Candace Osmiager, the director of the division, go ahead and introduce those staff members that are present in the meeting today.
Great, thank you. Wanted to welcome Joel Williams, Eric Dixon, Marty Chilane, Todd, Marisa. We also have Shannon here with us today, taking minutes. Thank you, Shannon. And then online we have Tom Cox and Russell Hadley. Looks like Jacqueline's here. And then we also have our awesome AV team. Paul's here with us in Utah County. And then Kevin's manning the station, I guess, back in Salt Lake City. So thanks, Carmen. And then I mentioned Russell and Tom are online as well. So
yeah, and we don't generally the board, we have a computer in front of us that allows us to see what's going on. But the one today is showing behind us. So we'll for board members, you'll just need to be on your best behavior. You won't be able to see what you're what's happening in front of us. So thank you. But again, just wanted to give a shout out to all of those who were involved in organizing the board tour yesterday. Staff members and local representation that was involved in that activity. We were able to see firsthand some of the accomplishments that have been made with board funds, and those that have been approved and will be in the process over the next few years being implemented. And so we know that the board funds are being put to good use, and we acknowledge that, appreciate the hard work of the staff that helped to assist in seeing that is taken care of. So with that, we'll just go ahead and go on into our briefing meeting. And first item on the agenda will be we have the review of the minutes. Are there any changes or directions that we need to make to the minutes that have been submitted for last month's board meeting?
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. I read the minutes on my iPad and I find errors. And then when I sit down at a desktop, there are no errors. So I don't know what's with me and my iPad.
Okay, but as it stands, then there are many corrections or additions need to be made to the minutes. Compliments to Shannon for putting that together, because last board meeting was a pretty hefty meeting as far as the number of projects that were reviewed and approved. And so we appreciate those efforts in putting that information together. Okay, we'll go into the review of projects then. The first one is Greenbelt Irrigation Company. That's kind of a unique name, but anyway, Greenbelt Irrigation Company. So whichever staff member is going to address that one.
Yeah, and just give you all a heads up, that with some conflicts of other things that need to get done, or just the idea of driving down, to present, for a few minutes. The staff is not gonna be here. So Russell, Tom, and Ani are there, but Jacqueline will be presenting Muddy Creek. So I'll just be doing the reports during the board meeting.
And just so you're all aware, the initial committal of funds, they're all just projects you've already seen, and it's just committing the funds. You've already authorized them all, so
There's no new reports.
pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Well deserved after the last one. And on Greenbelt, just to let you know, we wrestled back and forth. Is it Greenbelt one word as in the agriculture thing, or is it Greenbelt like a karate thing? And I had it figured out at the first, and then I got mixed up, and Shalane reminded me it is the, black belt, brown belt, green belt. So I was just gonna look up really quickly, and I'm sorry I don't have this ready. But they do have, Greenbelt was one of the ones that came without an engineer. So we only did authorization of their grants because of that. They have since gotten together with JUP engineers, JUP's doing a lot of these for a lot of the projects. And so as expected, costs did go up. I was trying to track down really quickly the email from him letting us know. Yeah, messages out. Just giving us some information on that. It's not just engineering. There were other things that needed to be looked at, which is why we had hoped everyone would come in with an engineer to start. So they're just requesting to do additional funds to cover those costs. So it was originally the board authorized $50,400 for the grant, and now the request is $82,600. And so the project went up from $72,000 to $118,000. Again, I was trying to look that up. I had the information, and I don't have it right in front of me right now. So that's that one.
So we'll just be asking you to commit the funds.
Yeah. So it'll be additional, but we're just as committal. Okay, that's yours, Charlie.
Yes. Next, you're prepared to
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am.
make the recommendation, okay? Next one is Newton water users. This was also in the Charles area.
Yeah.
Anything?
This is just the same. It just committal of funds, and it's committal of funds of the loan portion for the purchase agreement. They, got everything together and ready, and so they already have the grant funds committed. This is just to commit funds for the loan.
That's what the rest of them are.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, after the last one was so exciting, we thought we'd give you a break. So that one is as authorized, committal of funds just for the loan.
And I'm prepared to make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, canal irrigation,
Yep, that is gonna be the same. It's just committal of funds for the loan portion of it. So
Okay.
nothing's changed. It's as authorized.
and this, Jim, this is in your area,
Yes,
okay? You'll be prepared to make the motion for that one?
yes.
Okay, next one, Smithfield irrigation.
So,
Charles, yeah.
yeah, Smithfield, same thing, just committing funds now for the loan portion. They've got working on all of their requirements to be able to move forward with this. And this will be different than the last board meeting. We're going back to the same old, where we.
One at a time.
One at a time, because there were so few. We went ahead and
Okay.
one at a time. So that's how we're set up for today to do that.
Okay, the next one, North Summit Pressurized Irrigation Company, that's in my area. It's gonna be make, last year, make a motion for that particular one.
And same thing, just as authorized, but committal of funds for the loan portion.
Okay, and then Muddy Creek, special item.
Yeah.
So the board has funded 5 different projects for Muddy Creek. In this last one, the board committed funds in 2020 for phase 3 of their project, which was to install 7 miles of pipeline to deliver water to the east side of the Covenant service area. It was completed and there was approximately $234,000 remaining in board funds for this project, and they would like to use these funds to install an additional 2.2 miles of additional pipeline for the southeast portion of their service area. The total estimated cost for this additional 2.2 miles is $1,030,000. The Bureau of Reclamation is providing over $800,000 to complete this project. Staff's recommendation would be for the board to allow the remaining funds to be used to install an additional 2.2 miles of pressurized pipeline.
Okay, Norm, this is in your area. Any issues or concerns?
No,
Okay,
pretty much straightforward.
so you'll be prepared to make a motion
Yeah.
on that one as well. Okay. Well, I was quick to move through those.
We forgot what regular meetings can look like.
Okay, so then we have one new application, Morgan City. Was Russell gonna be here to,
There's no
there's no
presentation today,
presentation on this one?
just letting you know there's a new project.
Okay, I'll just address that one. Had opportunity to go with Russell on Tuesday of this week. Met with the city manager and the mayor of Morgan, and also their engineer. Did a site review of the project, and I had the opportunity to visit with them and to review the project. And Russell can talk more about it. Well, no, I guess he won't be
Yeah,
making a presentation.
not today.
He is
Not today.
online right now.
Yeah, he can answer questions.
Russell,
if
do you have
any
anything you want to
today.
add to that at this point?
Yeah, I stopped at East Canyon on the way back and fished, and I got skunked.
That's what you get for fishing for skunk. Supposed to fish for fish.
I just want to say I sent the application to Kyle, so he, because they come through us now. And I had already given it to Russell, and then was it an email or a text message I sent you, Kyle? And I said, Russell may have already reached out to you about this, but here's the Morgan application. He goes, well, he sure has, because we're sitting in a meeting with him. So right on top of it.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Good luck on your next fishing expedition. Okay, so after the review of the applications, the next one will be a report from Jake Sarago on the cloud seeding. Anything we need to report at this, and will Jake?
Jake will be here. I
Okay.
believe Jake's planning to be here. He's got a presentation, let you know what happened last year and also request funds for the coming year.
And then just as a heads up, there have been a lot of interest to increase our cloud seeding funds. So not necessarily coming from board funds, but request to get additional appropriation from the legislature. So in conjunction with DNR, we've been working to submit a building block to significantly increase our funds, potentially with an aerial program, or the construction and manufacturing of new remote generators that we can install throughout areas of the state where they're appropriate, and additional some new just manual generators being developed. So there's a pretty significant interest and effort to get additional funds for the cloud program. But once again, wouldn't come from the board funds, but an appropriation request from the
So
legislature.
the request today will be
Just our typical.
the same as what has been requested,
Where has that increased interest been coming from?
all over.
I think the drought, it has been in drought 8 of the last 10 years. And so I think there's a lot of interest to do what we can. Director Ferry, the new director at the department, has shown especially, he's really excited about it and has been talking with a number of legislators. So we're definitely having a lot of leadership from the department to increase our cloud seeding program.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, just a comment. It might be nice if we would actually cloud seed in the month of November. Some winters, that's the only time we get a snowstorm.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, it sounds promising what the director has presented to us, and I being a cloud seeder type, I may have to declare a conflict of interest on this today. So
When you say it would be nice to cloud seed in November, so does the program not start until December, or
Most
what prohibits it from starting?
Yeah, I mean, with the current funds that we have committed from the board as well as the local cost share, most of the programs start from December 1st through the end of March. There are some of the programs that we use funds from the lower basin, so they're in the Colorado River Basin, that we start earlier in November and end later in April, but it's because of those additional funds from the lower basin states that we do that. So those are typically our project areas in Colorado River Basin.
So if the additional funds became available, would it be feasible to be, I don't see where you're saying there's any prohibition from
No,
starting it earlier. It's just been tradition,
well, and I think it's
or I'm
probably
not.
driven by the local sponsor. Where yours is matching funds along with the local entity, I would guess it's when they want to start the program, not necessarily when we think they should start the program.
yeah, and if you take a year like last year, there weren't enough storms to use up the funds before the end of March. And so, at least in my area, they extended the cloud seeding season to the end of April. And I think maybe there was one storm in April last year.
Okay.
Yeah, that didn't get very far either. But the money was still there because there have been so few storms to see. So use up the funds or take advantage of the funds that went into the month of April last year.
So then the question comes to mind, is that something that the board should do to encourage sponsoring agencies to begin earlier, to take advantage of those? Would that have any bearing?
I mean, it really comes down to a budget thing. I mean, we're trying to get the biggest bang for the buck, right? So we're starting the programs typically and historically when there've been the most storms to see. But to Charles' point, we try to estimate how, with our contractor, how many hours will be needed to run the generators. But those are an estimate. So it's kind of a little bit tricky to kind of figure out the budget. So with this increased money, that's definitely something that we could do, is extend the cloud seeding kind of season to earlier and or later.
With that request of increased funding coming from the state sources, would the matching requirements for the sponsoring agencies still remain the same, or would that vary, or?
That's a great question, and I don't think we have that completely figured out. I think at this point, we're envisioning that the matching funds would remain the same, and that this would just be additional funds to really kind of supersize the whole of the Utah Cloud City.
But remind me again, what are the requirements for the matching funds?
It has been 50-50. So, and currently, we're not expecting, if the legislature gives us $2 million, that now all of a sudden the locals are trying to come up with $2 million, right? So I think that we're anticipating the current budgeted amounts would stay the same. And then this would just be additional funds to help the overall system and projects.
Okay, well, open for things to keep, Randy, go ahead.
I just, so the lower basin fund that remote generator. So how's it worked out?
And Jay can probably speak to this a little bit more. I do know that there were some issues that they didn't run it as much as they had anticipated. And I'm not sure if it was just a storm issue or if it was there wasn't the storms to run it, or if there was some sort of mechanical. He could probably help us understand that, but I know it wasn't operated as much last year as they had expected.
Well, and I would hope we keep pushing lower basin to do some additional ones.
That is part of, I guess, our strategy through this, is that by the state contributing more funds, we do have a cost match for state and local funds with the lower basin funds.
Right.
So by having additional state funds, we could ask the lower basin to increase their contribution to our Colorado River Basin projects.
So I think that would be a great thing to pursue with the forum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just to comment on Randy's comment is, that works well on the Colorado, but it doesn't, I don't get any help in the Bear River Basin from the lower basin.
Understand, but we sit in a different situation, and it's, we try to take advantage of whatever we can to try to enhance the supply.
Sure. And to comment on the remote operation, so I don't know, it's been a month or two since I talked to Jay Mark Humphrey, but he was pretty enthusiastic about remote operation of cloud seeding in his area. He's very supportive of that type of application of cloud seeding compared to the manual cloud seeders.
Well, I think Jay does quite a bit with the propane generator, which is a little, and I don't know if this is a propane remote that they did, or if it's the iodide or.
So in Jay's program, J. Mark Humphrey from Emory County Water Conservancy District, that is a propane,
Right.
but they are remote. So
Right.
they operate all of theirs remotely whilst it being a propane program. The remote generators that are being, if we get the additional funds, which we're anticipating, the remote generators that are being developed will be the silver iodide that are
Okay.
typically used in our the rest of our program areas that are from our manual generators, but these will be remote. So hopefully within the next couple of years, if everything goes well, we'll have 60 remote generators. And this is really, really beneficial in the sense that you can place them in areas where you don't have someone to manually
Right.
operate them. So you can get them at higher elevations or more remote areas, and really target areas that we haven't been able to find someone to operate a manual generator. And they're in discussions with our contractor. He has let us know that it's getting harder and harder to find people to operate the manual generators.
Well, and I know I used to run one of them, like Charles does, and with the silver iodide, sometimes you get nozzles plugged. Have you seen that, Charles?
Sometimes or all the time.
Well, I won't say all the time, but I certainly had times that it was frustrating because you couldn't get them to run when you needed them to. But I'm curious if that's part of the problem they're having with the remote is I just don't know how they're set it up with their design so they can sense a plug nozzle and somehow clear it yourselves. I don't know.
Yeah, and I would let Jake speak to that.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Well, I know I pushed for it when I was on the forum and I'm glad to see it continuing to move forward. So thank you for your efforts, Candace.
And just,
Remind us again, what's the dollar amount?
so that's what I was gonna say, right there up at the top of the report in your board folder, since you don't have screens, up at the top in bold is staff's recommendation.
Oh, I see.
Jake will be requesting $200,000 from the board for the cloud seeding program.
Because we had it was 150, we increased it 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
200. Okay. Okay, well, we'll look forward to that discussion and implementation from Jake on that project. Next one is Lake Bound. Oh, excuse me.
Yes, there will be a motion. We will need a motion.
Okay, thank you, Blaine, for bringing that up. So,
I'd be glad to do it, Kyle.
yeah, Randy, if you would go ahead and plan to,
Yeah, and I want to declare a conflict of interest, I guess, because I've.
You usually do.
I get my $100 every year.
That's partly why they have trouble finding somebody to run it. They pay you as well. They send you out there in the nicest weather to take care of them.
Yeah, blizzards.
okay, next item on the agenda then is Lake Powell Pipeline Report.
All right.
Go ahead and brief us.
Yeah, a lot of this is going to be kind of similar updates as we've had. The Bureau's working on it, continues their work. I will give a brief update on the ethnographic study update, which they're doing some additional studies out on some alternative alignments out near the reservation and stuff. We're working on some options out there. And so we'll have there's a contract that we had to get signed with that. But that's going to be we haven't done any contracts since 2020 for the studies tied into the LPP project. So we'll just have Stantec inform them that money, in a sense, is coming out of their contract, even though we did a contract with the tribe has their own ethnographers that they like to use, and we were able to save a bunch of money by having it set up through the state. So we got that underway, and the rest are similar. The modeling is continuing to move forward slowly. Education and outreach, big emphasis down there right now is conservation and using their water as efficiently as they can while things are being dealt with the Colorado River, which also includes evaluating Limerick Hot Springs, looking at desalination of that. So that's coordinating with Bureau of Reclamation, also deciding where funds will come for that if it does move forward, and if it should move forward at this time. Because that's kind of desalting. They say that's one of it might be the highest salt contribution and contributing single source along the Colorado River. Since they have what's one in Colorado. There's one in Colorado that they've been dealing with, and they're having issues with it. So they're kind of looking at the different options for increasing desalination. Water rights, there will be no updates on. I'll just let you know there's no updates on that. It's still waiting for the engineers and state engineer decision. Potential federal administration changes. Water of the United States. There have been some meetings, and they're saying they're probably not going to have a decision until November of next year is when they'll come out with the new plan of what the Water of the United States incorporates. Grand staircase Escalante National Monument boundaries, that's still being evaluated and looked at with the public input and all that. And both of those, they shouldn't impact LPP. Because when we started LPP, it was under the rules of the work. With the new administration, it's kind of going to be going back to those original rules, which is, so it shouldn't impact LPP. Basin States, Marty Bushman continues to do coordination with them. A lot of these, again, are kind of saying, hold on some of this coordination tied in directly to LPP while they figure out the river issues and the big picture issues. Additional permitting, those are ones that'll just kind of waiting to be finished after we were able to get moving forward a little better. Timeline is waiting for the SDEIS schedule, which Reclamation will not put forward until the state issue. A lot of these are kind of tied into, well, we can't do this till this, and it all ties back into the river and getting those issues resolved. Contract updates, the first two for Bureau of Reclamation and BLM. Nothing is going to be needed on those. I did mention the Kaibab Band of Paiute Indians. We have a contract with them for that ethnographic study update.
Excuse me, Eric, let me interrupt you. I'm sure everyone else knows what ethnographic is, but I don't. What does that mean?
That's kind of the study of the historical, the
Cultural resources.
Cultural resources.
Okay.
Yeah. And
You use that term, I forgot. Ethnographic, I wasn't quite up to speed on
there's a
that.
minor tweak, but yeah, that's
Okay.
the main gist of it is the cultural resources study, in the site studies, looking for what's on the ground that we need to
Okay.
either treat or avoid. For Stantec contract, with the slowdown, fortunately, they haven't been spending nearly as much money. Well, I don't know if that's fortunate or unfortunate, but they haven't spent the money that was budgeted for them and contracted to them that would go through the end of this year. But the time does end at the end of this year. So we are going to need a new amendment to give them an additional year, but they won't need any more funds. So it'll just be a time extension, but we'll need an amendment number. That'll be amendment number 11. And then we've got the wording for our recommendation to provide that extension through a new amendment. So probably repeat a lot of the same words.
Okay. Laura, this is in your area of involvement. Jim, would you be prepared to make a motion for that recommendation?
I will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Any questions, Eric, before we let him step away?
Lots going on.
Okay, thank
There's
you.
stuff going on, but just big picture still kind of holding things up.
Okay, next item to briefly talk about is the schedule of meetings for 2023. And I think in your packets, well,
Next page.
next page. Any questions on those proposed meeting dates for 2023? Just note that the one that is scheduled or is recommended for March is in conjunction with the Utah water users,
Yes.
as it has been in the past.
In December, it looks like we're gonna be on Tuesdays probably from now on, just with other meetings that happen, so. But if you're okay with that, we'd like you guys to adopt those dates during the board meeting.
Any questions on that proposed schedule? Okay,
I would note, I think the last couple of years, we've had 8 board meetings,
Yes.
but traditionally, we've only had 7. So we did go back to that kind of 7 board meeting schedule. So just kind of wanted to call that to your attention if there's any concerns with that. But we think that it is plenty for board to do. And we can
Yeah.
always call a special board meeting if there's
If it's
necessary.
needed, and Joel, I think Joel asked you all a
Oh,
few
yeah,
months
that's
ago
right.
if it was okay if we went back to 7. And I think I was the one who pushed us to 8, thinking we needed to be meeting that often. I don't know why, but yeah, I'm happy to cut back to 7 myself.
It's always fun to see you guys.
Well, thank you.
Well, as long as we're meeting the needs of approving, getting the loan approvals and project approvals and those types of things out in a timely manner, then if we can meet that demand with a 7-meeting schedule, with the understanding that we need to call an additional one or a special meeting, then we can do that. So.
Yeah.
And we'll need to adopt those, a
Yeah.
motion to adopt those as the meeting schedule for 2023.
Yes.
Okay.
Wayne doesn't have anything yet.
Wayne, if you go ahead and plan to make that motion.
You're first on your calendar.
I did all my work yesterday.
Duly noted, and it was a very good job. Yeah,
We'll keep them busy in the next quarter.
yeah, we'll give you something. So if you'll be prepared to make the motion.
I'll be
on
happy
that
to.
one. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll turn some time now to Candace to give us her director's report. Briefing.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll just cover generally, there's been a lot of requests to understand what is Utah's response to drought and what does their long-term water conservation efforts and strategy look like. So I'll go over that information. Also actually it was released July 27th, but we had that crazy board meeting, I shouldn't say crazy, very full packed agenda board meeting in August. So I don't think I covered it, but the coordinated action plan for water, which the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget has been leading up, released their 3rd chapter called Productive Agriculture at the end of July. And they're currently working on we are currently working on the next chapter of Healthy Waters and Watershed, which should be released sometime in October. So just kind of give a brief update on that. Next week is interim week. So there's a lot of legislative meetings. I've been asked to present on the state's efforts at state facilities, water conservation at state facilities. So I will doing that. I'll actually be doing that remotely because I'll be in Santa Fe at the Colorado River Conference. For their 100-year anniversary of the compact. So that will be really interesting. And then I'll also give an update on Colorado River issues in general. So generally what I'll cover for you.
I was trying to look up an email that I seemed like I got sent a copy of, and Blaine, you did as well. Someone down in your area concerns about House Bill 242.
Oh, right.
Right, there you go.
Yeah.
Implementation of that. Is there any action that needs to be taken by the board to address that?
I don't think there's any action that needs to be taken. I have asked Shalane to help me draft a response. So
Okay.
I did also receive a letter. So we'll be sending both a letter and an email back or in a response. If where that also came to you as well, happy to share that response with you. And so there's a response.
Copy us on it. So then they know we know that we've all talked and are aware of the situation.
And I mean, as I read it, a lot of their concerns are with the legislation in general, which is obviously a little bit out of our control.
Correct.
But we definitely want to respond to them and, give them our thoughts on kind of how they could proceed by contacting their legislature in their area,
Okay.
which I'm sure they've already done, I guess.
Well, I bring that up because in the meeting we had on Tuesday with Morgan City, and Russell can speak to this as well, but came to our attention that, Morgan City, as I recall, Russell, around 440 secondary meter connections. But it is not operated by the city, it's operated by another secondary provider, and they're one of the ones that are not going to comply with the requirement. They're just gonna let things move forward, they'll get to the 2030 and start implementing the penalty phases, those types of things, which I thought was kind of short-sighted. And so Morgan City is in a dilemma as to whether or not, because they feel like that the company is just going to let it ride, and then when it gets to the end of 2030, they're gonna say, oh, we'll just turn it over to Morgan City, or you take it. So they're trying to decide what it is they're going. So I wonder how many of those other scenarios are out there. Probably quite a few.
I have heard of a number of systems who that's their, maybe for lack of a better word, strategy is to not do anything at this moment. We are encouraging those systems that are interested. Obviously, we had a big board meeting last meeting regarding this, but to take advantage of the funds available,
Right.
because there is no guarantee that there will be additional funds in the future to help offset the cost. And I have had some discussion with legislators on even making minor changes to the bill. And there has been some definite pushback about even opening the bill up this soon after it has been passed. I've also heard some rumors that there's other entities that are looking for additional exceptions throughout the statute. And so there has been some discussions that I've heard in other areas of the state where, they want to open it up to create more exceptions for, other entities. So interesting.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting as we proceed along. I know this is not on the agenda. It may take other items to discuss.
Well, and Candace does have some information, I think, that she'd like to share with you in this meeting. Right? Is that? Or
Well, I was going to ask a question and kind
Okay.
of give our status update as to, what's happening with all the loans and the applications and stuff that were approved.
Yep.
Last month and how that's moving along and.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I can discuss that now specifically or cover it in the status of funds. Because I do have that kind of highlighted. That's the big.
Let's just go ahead and incorporate it in the status of funds
Okay.
update then.
Okay. Yep, I'll add a little bit more when we get to that.
Great. So yeah, that would be
Speaking
different.
of that, is that the next item on the agenda? I mean, it's not noted as such, but
No, we have, Candace has a list of things she wants to.
Yep, as part of the information to the board. So if we're done discussing the agenda, we can move on to
Okay.
the next one.
well, see, I'm looking at one agenda and each thing that I have to refer back. to another
Go
one.
back to
So,
the answer.
okay, so we're at that point, information to the board.
Okay, sounds good. So this happened about just around the same time as our last board meeting. But Eric was on vacation and we had a very busy board meeting, but I just wanted to make sure that you all are aware that Eric Dixon is our new design and construction section manager. So we're excited to have Eric in his new role. He's already been doing a great job and we're, looking forward to him being a manager in that section.
So is he gonna pass the LPP on to someone else? Like Joan did,
Not
or
for
is that gonna-
Not for right now. And here's where we get to have some fun because these, as my two primary managers now, both are managers of a section in the office and of a large project. So as Marisa has the project funding section and Bear River Development, Eric gets to have design and construction and the Lake Pell pipeline. So
Okay,
as long as they each feel like they can cover both, we'll let them continue to do that.
The Bear River won't let Marisa go.
That's kind of what we figured.
Well, and I think we do recognize that if there's additional need or they need additional support, we'll try to, assign staff
Absolutely.
to help them as needed, but we do anticipate they'll remain at those two.
okay,
Great. The next item is actually status of funds.
Yep.
So Shalane.
So as you'll note, as you look through, there's not been a lot of change since we saw you in August. You know, a lot of those asterisks went away, especially in the in the ARPA funds, because now they aren't being presented. They actually were committed. And so it looks very much the same, but
Can we just walk through, will you just walk through?
sure. So you can see in the revolving fund that there's, well, and I'll just mention that Morgan application is the only new one we've had other than the second round of secondary meter grant applications. So it's interesting. We even had staff ask us, have there just not been new projects? And it's like, no, there really haven't been lately. I think people are so focused on this, and not just us, but also water providers, that this has been the focus for a lot of people. So we haven't had a lot of projects come in. But you can see in the revolving fund, we have some funds there, but dam safety takes a huge part of it. And so there's not a lot left if we get everything actually contracted. City water loans hasn't changed too much. We did get a little influx from the payoff of the recapitalization money. And so we are actually about double what we sometimes are in that fund for the year, sitting at about 15 million, but we are looking to take the Morgan project from these funds as well. So if they continue to move forward, that's another, I believe it was just over $3 million that's listed later as one of those future funding needs. So then in the C&D fund, this is where we received the big influx of cash after paying off our debts. But you have enough large projects that you've committed, that have been bonded, that are sitting out there even just in the authorization stage. And now with all of the secondary meter loan projects as well, that you can go to the end of that list on page 4 and see that if everything's funded, we're down to 30 million, about this, over 31. So we aren't doing this, hey, go get big projects, go find big projects. We just don't really feel a need to do that right now. 31 million can seem like a lot, except that most of our projects lately have been pretty big. So we are working towards things like the one middle of funds we had at the last meeting was the city of South Salt Lake, which is 8.5 million. And they are working towards their requirements so that they should have their bond closing soon. Jacqueline, is that correct? Yeah, I think they're almost to have their bond closing. So that will move up and we'll consider those funds actually spent. The small secondary meter grants, of course, not much happening there because the small systems don't want 50% money when they can get 70. So we have contracted one project, that was the Linden City, that then came back and asked for additional ARPA funds. But the board gets $2 million a year, so we added that in this year. Now we're trying to figure out exactly, can we spend that if we still have ARPA funds available, or will no one want that this year? And then, yeah.
If I could, remind me again what differentiates or designates the difference between the 70-30, 50-50.
Okay, so the small system, that was actually appropriated to the board and before we got the ARPA funds.
Right.
And it is just $2 million a year. It's a 50-50 split, and it has to be fewer than 5,000 connections to be designated a small system or a city or town.
Did we as the board establish the 50-50? Or
No,
That was
in
through
legislation?
legislation.
that was through
And
legislation.
I believe it was in 2021, those funds were appropriated.
I think it was. You got your first money in July of 2021, and Linden was the first project to come to us. So we had committed those funds, and then the ARPA funds became available, and they said, can we get some of those too? And that's why they had a weird percentage request at the August meeting is we were just bringing them up to the 70% total, but also using this 50/50 money that had already been committed.
Okay,
So then we get to the ARPA grant or the ARPA grants. And the one thing that's, I mean, besides all those asterisks going away, like I said, being indicating that they're being presented at the meeting, you'll notice, oh, nope, I didn't put it there at the bottom. But you can see after the first round, even just considering the authorizations, we had $60 million left. On the very last page, the next page after that indicates the future needs. I've separated out the second round of ARPA applications there at the bottom of page 8 of status of funds, which indicate the second round of applications we received. So you can see Center Creek Irrigation, Charleston, Daniel Extension, Green Canyon, Lehigh submitted a second application, Salem, Spring Creek, Springdale, and Wasatch Irrigation Company. So we've got those applications totaling almost $13 million in additional ARPA funds.
and when you say Lehigh submitted a second application,
Yes. So this is probably a good time to discuss this. I don't know if Marty wants to say anything. But as you may recall, you got your ARPA funds in 2 separate pots. You got $50 million in 2021.
right?
And we're told to come up with rules. And then you got $200 million that went along with the new law, HB 242. So we talk about a $250 million pot, but it's really 2 pots. And our attorneys advised us that the maximum $10 million that's in the law applies to each pot, not total.
Okay,
So we have indicated to others, not just Lehigh, that if the $10 million will not fund their entire project, they can submit an application for the second pot. So we'll have to keep it separate and make sure we're tracking the money properly. But it allows those entities who just have way too big of projects to fund with $14 million total to get a second shot at the money, as long as it's available.
and so in a way, it is a benefit
Yes,
for those to be able to come back in and ask for 2 separate
yes,
or 2 type allocations out of 2 different pots of money.
yes.
Okay,
And there have some of the discussions that I've been having with some of the legislators, and one of the, to be honest, changes to the statute that have been discussed is lifting that cap in general. And then the discussion leads to, well, have the smaller systems have they had enough time to come and apply for it? So that's something for you all to consider as you're looking at these applications is, do you feel like the smaller systems, that's the reason why the cap was there in the first place, is to make sure that the small systems had the opportunity to apply. So that's one of the questions that I think is still outstanding is, so in the legislatures that I have talked with them about that, that's their concern, is that they don't necessarily want to make any changes to the statute right now because, one, is it too soon after they've just done it? And 2, have the smaller systems had enough time to apply for the funds? And then you have to balance that 2026, while it seems far away, is not that far away when you're talking about construction, getting all the equipment. So we will definitely prepare reports and do that, but that will.
and I would ask the question for myself. I mean, I don't have a clue as to have all the small operators within the area that I represent have not an opportunity to apply.
Right.
I mean, I don't know whether they have or haven't, so.
Well, and I'm happy to report that clearly with the funds that have been requested in the second round, there are still funds available. So we are going to have a third application period. We haven't set that yet. I believe we're planning on somewhere near the end of the year. Give us some time to get through these first and second. And to your prior question about what's been happening since August 4th. It took us a lot longer than expected to get a grant contract template created so we could do 70 of these contracts. You know, a little more involved than I think any of us thought it'd have to be, making sure we get certain, and I'll just give you a little background. With the grant contracts that you've done in the past, most of them have been dam safety or bond insurance grants. That's really the only grants you've dealt with in the past. And there have been very few requirements other than saying for dam safety, you've got to meet the Office of Dam Safety and the Division of Water Rights has to be happy with what you're doing. And if they are, then we'll pay for the work. This was different because it's federal funds coming through you. There are certain requirements that we said, okay, you know, you're going to have a water management conservation plan. And we wanted that to be, you know, agreed to. There, this whole educational component, data communication, we wanted that written into a contract. So even though you're giving them money, unlike most of the time, there are a couple of strings that the law attaches that we wanted to be in that contract. So we couldn't just use our standard grant contract that we've used in the past. We wanted to come up with something new. And that just meant a little more, well, I'll just say a lot more people involved trying to make sure that everything was as it should be. We do have a grant contract template in place and the grant contracts are now being prepared. There were several applicants who, even though we asked you to commit their funds, didn't have a final water management and conservation plan. They had one that they drafted up, but it hadn't been adopted or approved by our staff. And so there was a bit of a process there that we were going through. I haven't looked in. Do you know how many grant contracts are currently prepared? The last I looked, I think it was about 15 out of the 70 have actually been prepared.
Well, there's some others prepared, but they're not in there yet because
Right.
we're waiting
So-
for adoption of a water conservation plan or something.
Right, and for those of you who maybe haven't been chairman and maybe don't ever see a contract, you may not realize that it goes through quite a review process before it ever gets to the board chair for signature. And because of the number that we've got going now, Stephen Gregerson, our project funding specialist, is actually setting them up in Adobe Sign so that they can just be automatically sent to the next person and they can be electronically signed. So these grant contracts will be lumps. There won't be all of them at once. But I think he's planning groups of 3 to 5 in one set that will then start the routing process through Marisa, me, Joel, Candace, our financial, Jim Egbert, our finance and budget officer, and then Kyle, chairman, before it goes to the company or city or municipality for their approval. So, so that process is starting. Yep, it's taken over a month, and we were all a little disappointed that it took a while, but we feel like we've got it in the right spot now that we can move things quickly. And we've also given those applicants time to make sure they're really ready to go. And as you saw in today's meeting, there weren't a whole lot of them that were ready to go on their loan requirements either, just a few of them today. So there's still some of those requirements to be met before we move into the regular process that we always have for our C&D projects.
So it looks like there's about 38 that have been authorized in our loans, but have not at this point after today had been committed.
Right.
There's still a number of offers.
Especially bonds, they take longer.
Yeah,
Bonding
The
process.
bonding process is much longer, but the grants, all of the grants that have been authorized and committed to date, the project managers are working on those grant contracts now that we have the template created, and we'll be routing those. I don't know, have you seen any? Stephen announced that they'd be starting.
Well,
I saw one.
it's Davis Weaver.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so Davis and Weaver, as you may recall, came to us completely ready for everything. So we had to authorize and commit their grant and their loan. And so those contracts are actually going at the same time. But the rest of them will be coming to you, or at least coming to us and then to Kyle pretty soon. So, yeah, be watching those emails.
Can I,
How sure are we that all of these little water companies and everybody throughout the state is aware that this money is even available? How does the word get out?
So I know it was on the news. I saw it on the news. It's on our website. We've actually put out in press releases to notify
But we
people.
haven't sent anything out individually to each of these.
No,
water groups.
because we don't know who they all are. That's another thing we're actually working on through this process, is figuring out who all the secondary water providers are. But we don't have that list unless they've come to us for funding before. We don't necessarily know who provides secondary water through the
And
state.
to Wayne's point, I think we do need, before this next open application period, we need to, I don't want to say go on a walkabout, but we need to go kind of on a little roadshow to make sure people are aware that these funds.
And I think we
Do
do,
another press
because the
release.
water use survey
Mhm.
specifically that they fill out every year that they're required to, that our division and the Division of Water Rights have.
yeah.
All of those say, do you have a secondary water system? So,
Right.
Can I speak to that? We actually, one of our newest employees, Jack Heinzman, is trying to get not only service boundaries, but he's trying to figure out who is who in the secondary world. What water rights has and what we have based on past projects back to, 47, he's trying to meld them together. But we have stuff that water rights doesn't have. And then the issue is, how do we even contact these people? Because if we funded them in 1990, and that was the last time we funded them, probably the same players are not the same players. And the one other thing is, consulting engineers are doing a good job of reaching out. They know who they know who people are. But to that point, because you brought up the small systems and the concern if they're getting the news, it wasn't until after the board meeting that I got a phone call from someone saying, "Oh, I saw this on the news." And by that time, our second round closed, right? And so we do have somewhere on our website where they can put in their name when we do the third round application. And the other thing that I am finding and is, even those that have come to us and in that first round, there's still hesitancy to even do this in the first place. And as you saw, one of them came to the board meeting ready to tell us they were withdrawing, which I was their project manager and I had no idea. And I talked to him at the beginning of the meeting. So there's some hesitancy on some of that. And it's usually those smaller systems have that sense.
That is one of the questions
But-
on that form, though. Do you have
Sure,
a secondary system?
it
So
does.
that would be a good start.
Yeah,
And that's
And
what
this-
Jack has been doing. And trying
And
to
this
do
is
that.
one of the helpful things, and Wayne, to answer your question, how do we know? So if you notice, a lot of these in the second round, these ARPA future funding projects, most of them are in your area. And why? Because Central Utah Water Conservancy District decided to help them out and fill
They
out,
already
help
help them
them
with their,
get their applications.
they help them with their system as it
And
is.
got them into us. So that's why most of these are small requests. Center Creek, 121,000, Charleston, 145,000.
They're all Heber Valley.
They're in the area that Central Utah.
Well, and Roger Pearson.
Yeah.
Over
So,
Heber Valley, Roger used to work for us.
so yeah, maybe we need to do a better job of reaching out to those who might know who their smaller providers are, because we don't necessarily have that list. but maybe through others we have access to.
Well, and through conjunction with water rights and with some of the other districts, I think we will make an effort in this prior to our next application period being open, getting the word out. I mean, we definitely put out press releases, did presentations. I mean, we did put a lot of effort into it, but I think before the next application period goes out, we need to do another outreach and make sure that we're, doing our due diligence to try to get that information out.
I talked about maybe Utah water users and having them actually be the ones sending the email. Do we know if any of those ever got, we were gonna get some stuff. Did you know if water users got anything out?
It was rural.
Was it rural water?
Yeah, rural water did send something out.
Okay.
To all of their
Well,
folks.
I'd like to check on Utah water users. So, yeah,
Yeah,
see if they can help too.
we'll do additional outreach. Yeah, it's very important.
But we are looking at the water rights list, Blaine. I mean, he is, and it's working with the person in water rights that is gonna be overseeing the data coming in and stuff like that. So we're working on that.
Every one of those ought to be flagged, and if they haven't responded, maybe.
It's unfortunately more complicated than we expected and less obvious than we expected, so.
Okay, thank you. Good discussion. Blaine, do you have any more?
On the status of funds, that's all I had for you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Elaine a question?
Sure.
Have you heard anything from Millville City? I mean, they have a bunch of money
Sitting there,
authorized for them.
right, and I have not, recently,
I can't remember if it was Marisa and me or Russell
I
and
think-
me, or
wasn't it Ben? I think Millville was
I can't remember who went with me on
Ben,
that
and
tour.
can pull up all budgets.
But
okay, yeah, I tend to think.
anyway, I
Yeah,
don't know
no,
what's
you're
the matter
right.
with
It's been since 2019. And at this point, maybe they've decided that they don't want to pursue it. And if so, we should have it withdrawn. But I haven't heard anything recently.
Okay, they're in discussions trying to find sewer providers and all that.
Gotcha.
too,
So there may just be a whole lot going on that
Yeah,
keeps them from jumping right into this project.
okay, thank you.
Okay,
Great. So the next item is to discuss bond requirements and board guidelines to notify every water user about the public hearing by mail. Shalane, I think that one's yours.
Yes, it is. And I'll try to keep this short, but we've had an issue pop up with some of these secondary meter loans with entities that have to bond. The board has a requirement that if the sponsor is going to issue a non-voted revenue bond, that they will hold a public meeting to describe the project and its need, cost, and effect on water rates, which no one has a problem with that. But to go along with that requirement is that they must give written notice to all the water users in their service area. The issue we're having is a lot of these entities that provide secondary water don't necessarily bill their users even on, I mean, some don't bill them at all because some get their funds purely from property taxes. Some bill them an annual assessment, so it's not a monthly bill, so they can't. So with a large number of connections, we had one in particular say, if we create a mailer and send it out to every user specifically just to notify them of a public hearing, it's going to cost us $15,000, which takes away what's available for the actual project. And so they have no problem with holding a public hearing. They are used to posting notices at their offices, on the public notice website, on their own website, and then sending notices out maybe via email, but not a written mailed notice. And so I'm not necessarily asking you today to waive that requirement for everyone. I don't think that we should just say, sure, we don't need to do that. But I'd like to discuss with you if you are okay, if there's a project in your area and we can come to you and say, South Ogden Conservancy District is gonna have an issue mailing notices. Are you okay if we waive this written notice requirement for them? But since it is in the board guidelines, we wanted to bring it to you and see what the board thought about it. Any thoughts?
Questions, comments?
Well, I was just thinking, that would have to be the medium to large users to get into that kind of money
It is.
to send out a mailer. 'Cause the
Yes.
smaller ones wouldn't cost that much.
No, and the smaller ones are typically irrigation companies who aren't bonding anyway. It's a purchase agreement. It's the water districts and that's the thing. Cities probably don't have a problem because most of them send out monthly notices. But a lot of the water districts get their funds purely from property taxes or, they may only, if they ever send anything out, it may go out once a year. So that's the problem we're coming into is we've got entities that don't normally do this type of thing and now are going, wow, this is going to be, we probably don't even have enough staff to do this. We probably have to hire more people. So,
I would think as the local board member going to know those entities well enough to know
okay,
what the situation's gonna be.
okay,
And you're relying on us would be logical.
okay. Kyle, do you agree?
Seems like a plausible approach.
Okay. Most of the ones we've heard from so far are in your area.
Oh, thank you.
That guideline was probably written pre-email and pre.
Oh, yeah,
Maybe that's something we should change by written mail or email.
Yeah.
Something,
Right.
I mean, some sort of.
Amend it to make it more in line with today's.
But if
What's
you got one water user out of the whole bunch that doesn't have an email, you may have a requirement though, so you gotta be careful there.
right, right.
And I know people that don't read email and they don't read snail mail either.
The entity's not required to make them all read what they send them.
Right.
And
Met the requirement notified.
Mhm.
and so few people subscribe to some of the newspapers in
Right.
rural parts of Utah that have, or metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
Newspapers aren't what they used to be.
Okay. All right. Well, that works for me. If you're all comfortable with that, we'll just contact each of you if there's a question comes up in your area. Because I will say, the state requirement is simply that it be posted on the public notice website and published in the local paper. So it's just the board has this extra requirement that they're finding burdensome. And I thought we could probably allow some accommodation, but we'll take it on a case by case basis. Thank you.
Great. And I know we're heading up on our actual board meeting, so I'll go through these last couple quickly. The Water Summit is on October 18th, and it has typically been in Provo, but now they've changed their site to the Davis County Convention Center, or Conference Center. So it's in Layton this year. If any of you are interested in going, please reach out to Shannon and we'll get you registered. It should be a good event. Our next board meeting is October 27th, and it will be similar to the timing of this meeting. We're going to shift it to the morning, and then we will have from 2 to 4 our 75th anniversary celebration. And both the board meeting and the celebration will be at the Capitol. So just for your planning of that day. We did submit some rules for our landscaping rebates that were submitted on September 1st, 2022. And then we anticipate those, if there's no issues, will be live the middle of October. So to get that landscaping rebate program up and going. And then we did submit a whole bunch of building blocks, which I'm happy to cover with you if you're interested, but in the interest of time, maybe I'll just email those out so you're aware of them. But then you don't have to. Yeah. Okay.
Format would take time in the board meeting,
Sure.
actual board meeting portion of it, so.
Okay. Yeah, I can move that to my.
Well, thank you. hearty discussion on a lot of topics, and thank you for staff's involvement in that. So if there are no further discussion, we'll call for a motion to adjourn this meeting and then reconvene at 10 o'clock for our board meeting. Well, anyone want to make that motion?
To adjourn this meeting.
Jim did.
Okay, and Jim moved to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll stand adjourned and be back here at 5 minutes to, ready to go for the next round for the board meeting. Thank you.